Prospect theory, unearned wisdom. Why do smart people make bad financial choices? Could it be that the very foundation of how we think about economics and decision-making is missing a crucial piece of the human puzzle? Prospect theory is a revolutionary idea in the world of economics. Think of it like a new lens for seeing how people make choices, especially when it comes to money and risk. For a long time, economists believed that people make decisions like super smart computers, always choosing what's best for them based on logic. But prospect theory showed us that's not how it really works. People are more like quirky, unpredictable characters. They often prefer avoiding losses more than gaining rewards, even if both options are worth the same. It's like being more upset about losing $10 than happy about finding $10. This theory opened our eyes to the real, sometimes messy ways we all decide what to do with our money and our lives. Throughout history, long before the formalization of behavioral economics, several philosophers hinted at the inherent irrationality in human behavior. Their insights, often expressed in more philosophical terms, laid the groundwork for our understanding of the complexities of human decision-making. Socrates, 470–399 BC. Famous for his Socratic method, Socrates often exposed the inconsistencies in the thinking of his contemporaries. He believed in the importance of questioning and introspection, suggesting that people frequently act based on flawed understanding or unexamined beliefs. Plato, 428–348 BC. Plato, a student of Socrates, recognized the conflict between reason and desire. In his famous work, The Republic, he describes the human soul as having different parts, the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive, with irrationality arising when reason does not govern the other parts. David Hume, 1711–1776. A key figure in the Scottish Enlightenment, Hume argued that reason is often the slave of the passions. He believed that emotional responses, rather than rational deliberation, primarily drive human behavior. Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844–1900. Nietzsche often criticized the notion of human rationality. He suggested that irrational drives and desires deeply influence human actions, and that society's emphasis on rationality overlooks the fundamental aspects of human nature. These philosophers, each in their own era and style, touched upon the nuances of human behavior that go beyond cold, calculated rationality. Their work presaged modern understandings of behavioral economics, illustrating that the undercurrents of irrationality in human decision-making have been a subject of intrigue and study for millennia. Classical economics is like the old-school way of thinking about money and markets. It started way back in the 18th century, with big thinkers like Adam Smith, who's often called the father of economics. These guys believed in the rational actor model. It's a fancy way of saying they thought people made money decisions like perfectly logical robots, always picking the best option for themselves. This idea was super important. It was like the golden rule for understanding how businesses work, how people buy and sell stuff, and even how whole economies run. Economists use this model to predict everything from stock market trends to how prices change in the supermarket. It was like a map that everyone followed, thinking it would lead them to treasure every time. So the rational actor model was a big deal. It shaped how banks lent money, how companies planned their future, and even how governments made laws about taxes and spending. It was all about believing that people, given all the facts, would always make the smartest choice for their wallets. Let's zoom in on Adam Smith, a superstar of classical economics. Picture him as a rock star economist of the 18th century. He wrote this famous book, The Wealth of Nations, which is like the Bible of economics. Smith had this cool idea called the invisible hand. He believed that when people make money decisions for their own good, like a baker baking more bread to earn more, it magically helps everyone else too. It's like when you're doing your thing, chasing your own goals, you're also making the whole economy better without even trying. Smith thought people were naturally good at figuring out what's best for them. He saw folks as smart shoppers, always hunting for the best deal or the biggest profit. In his view, it was like everyone had a little calculator in their head, always crunching numbers to make the smartest choice. Then there's another key figure, John Stuart Mill. He was like a rock star's opening act in the world of classical economics. Mill also thought people were super rational, like many economists making decisions that make the most sense for their wallets. These guys set the stage for how we thought about economics for centuries. They painted a picture of a world where everyone is making decisions like a chess grandmaster, thinking 5 moves ahead. It was a neat and tidy world, a bit too neat, as we'd find out later with the rise of behavioral economics. Fast forward to the 20th century, and things in the world of economics started to get a bit wobbly. It's like we were all cruising along in a classic car, thinking we knew the way, and suddenly we're hitting some unexpected bumps in the road. The rational actor model, our trusty old map, wasn't fitting the real world as neatly as before. People started noticing odd things. Like, why do shoppers freak out over a small price increase, but don't bat an eye at spending big on something they don't need? Or why do investors panic and sell their stocks when prices drop, even though that's the perfect time to buy? It was like watching someone trying to put together a puzzle, but the pieces just don't fit. This was the time when economists started scratching their heads. They began to see that people aren't always these perfectly logical, profit-maximizing robots. Instead, they're more like regular folks at a buffet, sometimes taking too much, sometimes too little, and often just piling up their plates without a clear plan. It was a bit of a wait-a-minute moment in economics. Scholars and thinkers started to question the old rules. They began to think maybe, just maybe, there's more to this whole decision-making thing than cold, hard logic. And that's where the stage was set for a new chapter in economics. One where our messy, unpredictable human nature gets a starring role. Enter 2 unlikely heroes in the world of economics, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. These guys weren't your typical economists. In fact, they were psychologists. Imagine them as the dynamic duo, ready to shake things up. Kahneman, with his sharp insights into the human mind, and Tversky, a master of understanding how we think and why we err, were like detectives of the mind. They were curious about why people don't always make the smartest choices, even when it comes to important stuff like money. They started hanging out, bouncing ideas off each other, and pretty soon, they began uncovering some mind-blowing stuff about decision-making. These guys were like the Sherlock and Watson of psychology, digging into the mysteries of the human brain. Kahneman and Tversky didn't just stay in their lab, though. They took their show on the road, challenging the big economic theories of the day. They were asking bold questions like, what if people aren't as rational as economists think? And what if our brains have a few tricks that even we don't know about? Their work was like a breath of fresh air, or maybe a whirlwind, in the somewhat stuffy room of traditional economics. They were about to turn the whole field on its head, showing that when it comes to money, logic isn't always in the driver's seat. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky weren't born with economics textbooks in their hands. Far from it. Kahneman grew up fascinated by the quirks and kinks of the human mind. He was like a detective of psychology, always curious about why we think the way we do. His life, shaped by his experiences as a Jewish child in Nazi-occupied Europe and later in Israel, gave him a unique perspective on human behavior under stress and uncertainty. Tversky, on the other hand, was the math whiz of the pair. Born in Israel, he had a knack for numbers and a sharp mind that could cut through complex problems like a hot knife through butter. He served in the Israeli military, and his experiences there, seeing decisions made under pressure, got him thinking about judgment and decision-making. What brought them together was this shared fascination with the mysteries of the human mind. They met in Israel in the 1960s, and it was like a meeting of the minds that was meant to be. Their conversations were a blend of psychology, mathematics, and sheer curiosity. Their path to challenging traditional economic theories was a bit like a detective story. They noticed that the models economists used didn't always match how people behaved in real life. Like, why would someone buy lottery tickets when the odds of winning were so low? Or why do people stick with losing stocks, hoping they'll bounce back instead of cutting their losses? Kahneman and Tversky saw that people's decisions were often swayed by fears, hopes, and other M.